The man defied his father's teachings, turned back time and rewrote history, all for a woman. Released in 1978, Superman, the film adaptation of DC's iconic comic series, marked a historic milestone. This trailblazing movie not only captivated audiences worldwide, but also solidified its place as a cinematic landmark, ushering in the age of superhero films. Far from the Milky Way, in a distant galaxy, lay a planet called Krypton, made of ice and crystal. It orbited a red dwarf star, drawing energy from it. Krypton's technology was astonishingly advanced, far surpassing Earth's by thousands of years. Yet the scientist Jor-El was deeply troubled. Two imminent threats to the planet's survival required immediate action. The first was the rise of 3 criminals on Krypton. After their failed rebellion, they were brought before the Planetary Council where Jor-El presided. The criminals were sentenced to life imprisonment, but their leader, General Zod, vowed revenge on Jor-El and his descendants before being imprisoned. The second, more pressing issue was that Jor-El discovered Krypton was doomed to explode within 30 days. He proposed interstellar emigration, but the Science Council dismissed his warnings as mere rumors and prohibited him and his wife from leaving the planet. Though Jor-El reluctantly followed the Council's directive, he could not bear the thought of his infant son, Kal-El, perishing along with the planet. Ultimately, Jor-El made the agonizing decision to send his son to Earth, a distant world. With a tender gaze, he looked at the baby resting in a crystal vessel and gave him the most precious parting gift, a green crystal containing all his knowledge and wisdom. As the crystal device was activated, it ascended toward the sky. At the same time, Jor-El's prediction came true. The red dwarf star exploded, almost obliterating the entire solar system. The crystal spacecraft, carrying the baby and surrounded by planetary debris, sped toward the Milky Way at faster-than-light speeds. It was a long journey. Jor-El had ensured his son would be immersed in vast knowledge, teaching him the wisdom of Earth, the galaxy, and the universe, while warning him not to interfere with human history. The baby grew slowly, and by age 3, he entered Earth's atmosphere. In the heartland of America, amidst the vast plains of Kansas, the Kent couple was driving back to their farmhouse when their truck broke down near the crash site of a fiery meteor. As simple, hard-working farmers, their curiosity led them to investigate the still smouldering crater. To their astonishment, a cheerful, adorable boy emerged from the glowing pit. For Mrs. Kent, who had long yearned for a child of her own, this was nothing short of a miracle. In a moment of boldness, she proposed the unthinkable. They should adopt this mysterious child. Her husband, however, remained skeptical, concerned that the boy might have a family out there searching for him. Their debate was abruptly interrupted when the jack holding up their truck failed, causing the vehicle to fall toward Mr. Kent. Thus, the little one found not only a new home, but also a new name, Clark Kent. He grew up in a small Kansas town and attended high school there. To protect their son from being treated like a test subject, the Kents instilled humility in him, constantly reminding him to keep his extraordinary abilities in check. However, teenage Clark couldn't resist occasionally showing off in front of the girls he liked. One time, trying to impress a classmate, he dashed through golden wheat fields at the speed of a train to catch up with her car, but instead of admiration, she called him a freak. This reckless display didn't escape the sharp eyes of Mr. Kent. Expecting a stern lecture, Clark was surprised when his adoptive father instead offered him a thoughtful piece of advice.
When you first came to us, we thought that people would come and take you away because when they found out, the things you could do, and that worried us a lot. And there's one thing I do know, son, and that is you are here for a reason. It's not to score touchdowns. Huh?
Yeah, thanks, Dad.
The light-hearted conversation with his father turned out to be their last. Shortly after Clark left, Mr. Kent suffered a fatal heart attack and collapsed in front of the farmhouse. A modest funeral marked his passing, but Clark's heart was left in turmoil. Standing by his father's grave, he was overwhelmed with doubt and regret. I have so many abilities, so much power, yet I couldn't save him. That night, sleep eluded him. Tossing and turning, Clark felt an inexplicable pull toward the barn. Following his instincts, he entered the dimly lit space, lifted the cover of the cellar, and discovered a glowing green crystal, a gift left behind by his biological father. The next morning, as the sun rose, Mrs. Kent noticed Clark standing motionless in the wheat fields, lost in thought. She could see the resolve in his eyes, and her heart ached. Clark softly told her,
I have to leave.
As if she had been expecting this moment, Mrs. Kent simply nodded and said,
I knew this time would come. We both knew it from the day we found you. Remember, son. Always remember.
Clark left the farm behind and headed resolutely north, his journey leading him to the frozen expanse of the Arctic. There, he retrieved the glowing green crystal and cast it into the snow. The surrounding ice began to tremble as a miraculous transformation unfolded. Towering ice pillars erupted from beneath the surface, rising one after another until they formed a magnificent fortress of ice and crystal. Inside, holograms of Jor-El revealed Clark's origins, his incredible powers, and his moral responsibilities to live among humans, serve them, but never alter their history. A few years later, Clark Kent arrived in Metropolis. With his polished appearance and impressive typing skills, he quickly landed a job as an editor at the influential Daily Planet newspaper. Clark was assigned to the news department, where he worked alongside the talented reporter Lois Lane. At first they clashed over small matters, but when Lois learned that Clark sent half of his salary back to his elderly mother in the countryside, she began to view him more favourably. As they worked together, Clark found himself slowly falling for Lois, the sharp and beautiful career woman. However, Lois wasn't initially interested in her shy, reserved colleague. Their contrasting personalities became especially evident during a robbery they witnessed. When armed thieves demanded their valuables, Clark meekly handed over his wallet while Lois fought back fiercely. Clark possessed extraordinary abilities, but he kept them concealed from the public, only using them when a real crisis arose.
I guess I must have fainted.
You fainted.
Sorry.
One evening, after finishing work, Lois was urgently called in for an interview. The helicopter pilot sent to pick her up was careless. The spinning blades of the helicopter struck rooftop cables, causing it to crash, leaving the aircraft dangerously teetering over the edge of the building. The pilot lost consciousness, leaving Lois trapped inside, screaming in fear. A crowd, including police officers, gathered below, but they were powerless to help. As Clark was leaving the office, he noticed the emergency unfolding on the rooftop. Without hesitation, he dashed into a nearby hotel. Within seconds, he changed into his superhero costume. Just before Lois could fall, Clark soared into the sky and caught her. With his hair parted to the left and his glasses removed, he straightened his posture, revealing the powerful figure beneath, clad in his iconic blue suit and red cape. Lois had no idea who had saved her.
Who are you?
A friend.
To her, Clark Kent, the quiet colleague she saw every day, was the last person she would have imagined as her heroic rescuer. From that moment on, the people of Metropolis knew they had a new protector. By day, Clark continued his work at the Daily Planet, but by night he became a hero dedicated to justice. It seemed like he could hear every cry for help, always arriving just in time. A thief caught in the act was swiftly handed over to the police. Armed robbers attacking officers were quickly subdued. When Air Force One was struck by lightning and forced to make an emergency landing, Clark was there to help steer the plane back on course. Even when a little child's cat got stuck in a tree, he was the one to climb up and rescue it. News of a flying figure in a red cape spread like wildfire. Television stations eagerly reported on the mysterious hero, marvelling at how he had become a symbol of wonder and hope for the people. But what the public didn't know was that just 200 feet below Grand Central Station, 3 pairs of eyes were watching, already plotting their next move. Lex Luthor, a billionaire genius with a sinister mind, believed that real estate was the key to true power. In secret, he built a private castle beneath Metropolis, hidden from the world. Luthor saw himself as the smartest leader, plotting what he called the crime of the century, a devious scheme to seize vast amounts of land. However, his two bumbling assistants, Otis and Tessmacher, often sabotaged his plans without meaning to. Otis in particular was a glutton and perpetually careless, frequently attracting the attention of the police. On several occasions he led them straight to Luther's castle. Despite their incompetence, Luther trusted them completely and relied on their help to carry out his grand scheme. A mysterious new figure emerged in Metropolis, a hero with the ability to right wrongs. Luther quickly saw the flying man as a serious threat. Meanwhile, the editor-in-chief of the Daily Planet was eager to uncover the truth about this mysterious hero. He stormed through the newsroom, demanding that his reporters find a way to interview him. No one knew where to start, but Lois Lane received a mysterious letter signed only by a friend. That night she met the sender at her apartment, where she was dressed up for the occasion. Clark Kent, too, arrived, wearing his signature red cape. Clark hoped that through Lois the world could finally learn the truth about the flying man. He explained to Lois that he came from Krypton, a distant galaxy. His powers were extraordinary: super speed, immense strength, and even telepathy. He could see through anything except lead. When Lois learned that this seemingly charming saviour stood nearly 2 meters tall, weighed around 100 kilograms, and appeared almost identical to an ordinary man, her admiration quickly turned into infatuation. Curious, Lois shyly asked why he had come to Earth. Clark answered simply,
Yes, I'm here to fight for truth and justice in the American way.
Lois thought he was joking, but Clark responded with complete seriousness.
I never lie.
Lois then asked how fast he could fly. Clark admitted he had never measured it. So they soared high above the city, past the Statue of Liberty, and into the clouds. As they flew, Lois, an ever-dedicated workaholic, couldn't help but feel her heart flutter.
If you need to be loved, here I am. Read my mind.
Clark read Lois's thoughts, but with a wave and a smile he flew off into the distance. Watching him disappear, Lois murmured,
What a Superman.
Clark changed back into his regular clothes, put on his glasses, and invited Lois to dinner. Completely unaware, Lois didn't realize that the very man standing before her was the same Superman who had just flown off. While Lois touched up her look, Clark removed his glasses, puffed out his chest, and mimicked Superman's posture. He wanted to tell Lois the truth, that he was Superman, but in the end he couldn't bring himself to say it. The next day, Lois's article boldly graced the front page. Even Luther's assistant, Tessmacher, found herself charmed by this warm, down-to-earth man, someone who didn't smoke, drink, or tell lies. Luther found a way to control Superman. After studying ancient texts, he learned that following Krypton's explosion, fragments of the planet had fallen to Earth as meteors. Luther deduced these meteors contained a radioactive substance, kryptonite, which was lethal to Kryptonians. He planned to use kryptonite to weaken Superman while simultaneously advancing his own plot for the crime of the century. The US was preparing to test 2 nuclear missiles, and Luther saw an opportunity to transform himself into a real estate mogul. The San Andreas Fault, a major geological fault line running through California, divided a thriving urban area to the west from a barren desert to the east. Luther purchased vast tracts of desert land along the fault and devised a plan to direct the missiles to strike its weakest point. His calculations indicated that, if successful, the western portion of the continent would sink into the ocean, turning the desert into valuable beachfront property. Luther and his assistants set their plan in motion. They intercepted 2 missile convoys and managed to change their target coordinates. However, Otis's incompetence led to one missile being misdirected to New Jersey. Using a special frequency, Luther lured Superman into his underground lair to trap him. Clark traced the signal to its source and found the lair just as the missiles were launched. Superman tried to stop the missiles, but Luther tricked him. He made Clark believe that a lead box contained a guidance system that could stop the missiles. When Clark opened the box, he found a glowing green kryptonite stone which immediately drained him of all his strength. Luther had stolen the kryptonite from a museum to control Superman. He placed the stone around Clark's neck and shoved him into a pool. Under the kryptonite's influence, Superman struggled just to keep his head above water. Tessmacher, Luther's female assistant, was desperate. Her mother lived in New Jersey, and she didn't want her to perish in the disaster. When Luther refused to help, she turned to Superman for assistance. After Clark promised to help, Tessmacher hesitated, but then kissed Superman. Once the kryptonite was removed, Clark asked,
Why did you kiss me first?
I didn't think you'd let me later.
Thank you, Miss Tessmacher.
With the missile launch imminent, the staff realized the danger but were powerless to stop it. True to his word, Superman rushed to intercept the missile headed for New Jersey. He caught up with it and sent it into space. However, the second missile hit its target, triggering a massive earthquake that destroyed the fault line. Lois, who had traveled west to cover a story about a billionaire's land purchase, was caught in the earthquake and buried under falling debris. Clark dove into the Earth's crust, attempting to repair the fault, but aftershocks ravaged the surface, destroying bridges, railways and dams. Clark responded to every cry for help. He saved cars teetering on a crumbling bridge, used his body as a makeshift track to stop a speeding train from derailing, and rushed to a dam where he rescued a colleague. The dam, already severely damaged, finally broke apart. Clark used boulders to block the floodwaters. By the time he finished, Lois had been struck by falling rocks and trapped in a crevice. When Clark arrived, it was too late. Lois had stopped breathing. In his grief, Clark chose to defy time. He turned it back to the moment just before Lois fell, saving her life. As Lois gazed at Superman, his face lit up with a radiant smile.
Hi. Don't bother, I think it's dead.
Hey! Thanks a lot, Superman!
Before they could speak further, their colleagues arrived, interrupting the moment. Clark flew off, capturing Luther and Otis and delivering them to prison. The warden thanked Superman, but Clark simply replied,
No, sir. Don't thank me, Warden. We're all part of the same team.
Superman was created in 1938 during the Great Depression. His creators, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, like millions, triggering a massive earthquake that destroyed the fault line. Lois, who had traveled west to cover a story about a billionaire's land purchase, was caught in the earthquake and buried under falling debris. Clark dove into the Earth's crust, attempting to repair the fault, but aftershocks ravaged the surface, destroying bridges, railways and dams. Clark responded to every cry for help. He saved cars teetering on a crumbling bridge, used his body as a makeshift track to stop a speeding train from derailing, and rushed to a dam where he rescued a colleague. The dam, already severely damaged, finally broke apart. Clark used boulders to block the floodwaters. By the time he finished, Lois had been struck by falling rocks and trapped in a crevice. When Clark arrived, it was too late. Lois had stopped breathing. In his grief, Clark chose to defy time. He turned it back to the moment just before Lois fell, saving her life. As Lois gazed at Superman, his face lit up with a radiant smile.
Hi. Don't bother, I think it's dead.
Hey! Thanks a lot, Superman!
Before they could speak further, their colleagues arrived, interrupting the moment. Clark flew off, capturing Luther and Otis and delivering them to prison. The warden thanked Superman, but Clark simply replied,
No, sir. Don't thank me, Warden. We're all part of the same team.
Superman was created in 1938 during the Great Depression. His creators, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, like millions of Americans at the time, endured hardship, poverty, and a sense of hopelessness. Though the success of the first superhero in American comic history primarily benefited the publishers, Superman brought two invaluable gifts to people in despair: hope and inspiration. People lined up to buy comic books or gathered around their televisions to watch Superman cartoons and series. Over time, Superman became an integral part of American culture. Fighting for truth, justice, and the American way became a guiding principle for many kind-hearted Americans. As decades passed, Superman's story and powers evolved through numerous adaptations and retellings. In 1978, Richard Donner brought Superman to the big screen for the first time, directing not one but two films back-to-back. From the very start, the production was destined to be a major undertaking, with the script undergoing continuous rewrites and the cast repeatedly reshuffled. Ultimately, the relatively unknown Christopher Reeve was chosen to play Clark Kent, as his resemblance to the comic book version of Superman was striking. To ensure box office success, the filmmakers cast major stars in supporting roles. Marlon Brando portrayed Superman's father, Jor-El, while Gene Hackman took on the role of the villainous Lex Luthor. Donner created a superhero epic with a straightforward narrative, intentionally fragmented editing, dense special effects, and a pure yet optimistic moral core. The film became a massive hit, establishing the superhero genre as a viable cinematic category. Admittedly, Superman 1 is far from perfect and has its fair share of flaws. Marlon Brando's uninspired performance, the overly simplistic treatment of Clark's farewell to his adoptive mother, and the somewhat clumsy depiction of time reversal all come across as rough around the edges. Yet, for comic book fans, these imperfections contribute to the film's unique charm, making its roughness a part of its perfection. Much like a comic book, a film doesn't need to be flawless. Its simplicity allows space for the audience's imagination, and the low-tech special effects perfectly captured the essence of 1930s comics. It's a film with imperfections, but those imperfections are what make it perfect. The movie also had its surprises. Donner infused the story with humour, adding comedic elements that, while softening the menace of the villains, reflected the optimism and resilience of the 1970s. And isn't that precisely what Superman represents? Some say that Metropolis represents New York by day, while Gotham City represents New York by night. Christopher Reeve's Superman, with his dark hair, blue eyes, and ever-present optimistic confidence, was the perfect embodiment of hope. Even as Clark Kent, with his glasses and self-effacing demeanor, he often used witty remarks and subtle expressions to convey his humility and reliability. Superman could see all of Metropolis's darkness and hear every call for help, regardless of status or urgency. He always responded with unwavering commitment and success. He made people believe that as long as he was there, Metropolis would always bask in daylight. He was part of them, and they were part of him. Who wouldn't love such a Superman? In Superman 1, Richard Donner deliberately left several mysteries unresolved. How was Superman's Fortress of Solitude built? How did he acquire his superpowers? What happened to the three Kryptonian villains? And does Lois prefer Superman or the glasses-wearing Clark Kent? These questions and more were left for Superman II to answer.